If you listen closely to the ambient space around us here in Cafe Karma International, you can hear the quiet murmurs of conversations happening in the background.
It really is a timeless, quiet space.
It is. The walls are lined with these old leather-bound books. There's that rich scent of dark wood. And right here, the distinct grounding clink, the ceramic cup of hot herbal tea being set down on the table between us.
A perfect setting for our mission today, I think.
Exactly. So, pull up a chair. We are diving straight into the earthly and psychological source material of a very specific, powerful celestial energy, which is Purva Ashada.
Right.
And the core psychological manifestation our sources describe is an archetype we can call the Invincible Believer. This is someone operating with an intense, unshakable conviction that they simply cannot lose.
It is a remarkable psychological profile to examine. We're looking at an individual who functions from a state of absolute hard-won certainty.
Hard one being the key word there.
Exactly. To understand the root of this feeling of invincibility, you have to look at the exact psychological sequence of these energies. In the progression of the stars, Purva Ashada immediately follows Moola.
Yeah.
And Moola represents the energy of crushing destruction. It's the total dismantling of the ego, the breaking down of superficial life structures, and a kind of forced surrender to the void.
Right. Moola is essentially a cosmic control demolition. It strips away everything superficial until you are left with just the bare bedrock of your psyche.
Yes.
So the person embodying Purva Ashada has survived that absolute dissolution. They have walked through the fire of losing their previous identity or, their previous security.
And because they survived what felt unsurvivable, they emerge on the other side with incredible resilience.
They know their own strength intimately.
They do. And that specific knowledge makes them highly charismatic, deeply inspiring to others, and, as the texts note, formidable debaters. Because their conviction isn't theoretical, it is tested.
It's forged in the fire.
What's fascinating here is the shadow side of this personality.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the shadow is always where the real psychological work happens.
Absolutely. The texts frame this shadow archetype as the individualistic sage. Their wisdom is completely real, having been earned in the trenches. But it has a high probability of becoming dangerously egocentric.
How so?
Well, because they survived the destructive fire of Moola by relying entirely on their own internal grit, they risk developing profound hubris. They can become overly expansive, incredibly obstinate, and they start acting without calculating the consequences of their actions on the people around them.
That makes a lot of sense, especially when you consider that the planetary ruler of this energy is Venus.
Right. The planet of desire.
Exactly. Venus governs deep desires, the pursuit of pleasure, and the need for expansion. When you take that Venusian desire and fuel it with an ego that genuinely believes it cannot be defeated,
It creates a recipe for excess.
yeah, they begin to operate under the assumption that the normal rules of limitations simply do not apply to them.
Think of the psychology of someone who miraculously survives a devastating hurricane. They navigated the storm, they saved themselves against all odds, and as a result, they suddenly start to believe they can actually control the weather.
Oh, wow. That's a dangerous sleep.
It is. The confidence is entirely earned through their survival, but the ego overreaches in its interpretation of that survival. They confuse surviving the elements with commanding them.
If they think they are the hurricane, that creates a massive blind spot. I mean, they might stop looking at the barometer entirely because they assume they're immune to the weather.
Exactly. They stop listening to advice.
Right, they stop taking precautions because, in their mind, the people advising them haven't survived what they've survived. It's a form of survival bias that hardens into pure stubbornness.
Precisely.
Now, to help you, the listener, really map this out in your own life, we need to break down the underlying mechanics of this. When the texts talk about Palladas or the Navamsha, they are essentially talking about microfrequencies within this broader invincible energy.
Yes, it's not a monolith at all.
Right. It splits into 4 distinct psychological quarters. Could you break those down for us?
I'd love to. These 4 pedas show us how this overarching survivor archetype adapts its behavior based on different underlying motivations. The first peda is associated with Leo and the Sun.
So a very fiery solar energy.
Very much so. Here, the Invincible Believer takes on a highly proud and ethical stance. They possess strong executive confidence. The psychology here is someone who didn't just survive the destruction, but feels ordained to lead the reconstruction.
They operate with a sense of nobility.
And they have a distinct need for the limelight. Their invincibility is expressed through solar authority, They want to be the central, undeniable force in the room.
It's kind of the energy of the CEO who took a bankrupt company and turned it into an empire. They demand respect because of the trial they endured.
Exactly.
But then we slide into the second Peta, which shifts into Virgo and is governed by Mercury. And that need for the limelight vanishes entirely, right?
Completely vanishes. The energy here becomes highly intellectual. The sources describe this sublayer as focused on deep alchemical analysis.
The survival instinct turns inward.
Yes, into logic, systems, and hard work. This is the individual who applies their invincibility to decoding the world. They are constantly learning, analyzing, and trying to practically apply their wisdom.
So they don't need to be on a stage like the Leo Paperda.
Not at all. They are content in the laboratory or the library. They hold the deep conviction that they can solve absolutely any problem or overcome any obstacle if they just work hard enough at dissecting and understanding it. Their invincibility is entirely intellectual and methodical.
Which brings us to the third Pada, located in Libra. And for those tracking the deeper astrology here, this specific quarter is referred to as a Pushkara Navamsha.
A very auspicious placement.
Yeah, a Pushkara Navamsha essentially acts like a cosmic multiplier for positive, nourishing energy. Because the overarching energy of Purva Ashada is ruled by Venus, and this Libra sublayer is also ruled by Venus, we get a double dose of that influence.
The focus shifts heavily toward luxury, partnerships, and maintaining an easygoing nature.
It sounds much more relaxed than the first two.
It is perhaps the most comfortable manifestation of the archetype. Their invincibility isn't about fighting the elements or analyzing data. It's about harmonizing with their environment.
Right.
They have a distinct talent for reaping the rewards of life and enjoying the fruits of their survival. They manipulate their social environment with immense charm.
They intuitively understand that the easiest way to remain unconquerable is to make sure everyone around you loves you and wants to support you.
Exactly. They build alliances, cultivate beauty, and navigate challenges through diplomacy rather than force.
It is survival through charm. I mean, if you are universally liked and comfortable, you don't have to fight the war in the first place.
Right.
That leaves the fourth and final sublayer, which falls into Scorpio, ruled by Mars. This is a drastic shift from the charming diplomat.
A very sharp turn. The texts describe this energy as haughty, highly secretive, and deeply strategic. This sublayer contains profound occult depth.
The survivor in the Scorpio Peta is essentially a tactician.
Yes. Unlike the Leopata, who wants everyone to know their power, the Scorpiopata goes out of their way to hide it. They do not show their cards.
Never.
Their invincibility comes from operating from hidden depths. They use their intense Martian energy to out-strategize everyone else while keeping their true motives, their resources, and their next moves completely submerged.
They are the quiet person in the corner of the room who has already calculated 6 steps ahead. They know exactly how to dismantle the opposition if it becomes necessary.
Absolutely.
I want you to consider the deeply resilient people in your own life for a moment. Which of these masses of invincibility do you see? Do you recognize the proud, highly ethical executive, the relentless, methodical analyst, the charming, comfortable socialite, or the quiet, secretive tactician?
It's all the same core energy.
Yeah, one core psychological feeling, the absolute conviction that you cannot be defeated, adapts to its environment in vastly different ways.
The adaptability of this energy is one of its defining traits, really.
Yeah.
And the sources give us another layer of insight through the animal symbolism assigned to this psychology.
Right.
When we consider the concept of an unconquerable survivor, the mind naturally gravitates towards symbols of brute strength or apex predators.
Like a lion or a bear or an eagle.
Exactly. Yet the texts assign a very specific and somewhat surprising animal symbol to Purva Ashada, the male monkey.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It seems entirely counterintuitive at first glance.
It does.
But if you analyze the psychology of a monkey, it perfectly encapsulates the paradox of this energy. The monkey represents a highly intelligent, intensely playful, but fundamentally restless energy.
The Invincible Believer doesn't just want to survive, they require stimulation. They want to play with their environment.
Furthermore, the monkey is an exhibitionist.
Right.
If we recall the shadow side we discussed earlier, that Venusian desire for excess, the Leo sublayer's need for the limelight, the monkey symbol, highlights this intrinsic need to be seen. They need to perform and to showcase their cleverness to the world.
They possess an unconquerable spirit, but they are also deeply restless. They're constantly swinging from one branch of experience or one intense endeavor to the next.
They struggle with stillness.
They do, because their survival mechanism is wired for constant engagement and clever maneuvering.
They have all this residual survivor's energy, and they need a productive place to put it, which transitions smoothly into how this restless, monkey-like, invincible psychology actually manifests in the professional world.
Yes, the vocational paths.
The sources outline a few very specific areas where these individuals naturally excel. The first major category is water-linked professions, and this ties directly to the primary deity of Purva Ashada, Appas, the goddess of cosmic waters.
The psychological tide of water is profound here. You will frequently find these individuals thriving in shipping, the Navy, oceanography, or marine biology.
Places where the element of water is central.
Because the ocean is vast, unconquerable, and constantly in motion, much like their own internal landscape. They are drawn to environments that mirror their own depth and require a high degree of adaptability and respect for forces larger than themselves.
The sources also point to a second vocational area, which is purification and extraction.
Right.
One of the alternative symbols for this energy is the winnowing basket. Historically, this was a tool used in agriculture to separate the pure grain from the impure husk. So in a practical, professional sense, this translates to careers focused on refining raw materials or raw information.
Exactly. In an industrial context, this points to fields like oil refining or water purification. But in a modern information age context, it perfectly describes the psychology of data distillation.
Filtering the signal from the noise?
Yes. These individuals possess the mental endurance to wade into a massive, chaotic sea of raw data, filter out the noise, and extract the pure, actionable truth. Their analytical Virgo pattern traits really shine here. They survive the deluge of modern information by methodically separating what is valuable from what is useless.
Then there's the third vocational area the texts highlight, which is motivation and the arts. This is where the Venusian charisma, the Libra charm, and that exhibitionist monkey energy all converge.
They make incredibly inspiring speakers, influential teachers, and captivating actors.
The entertainment and motivational industries are just natural homes for them.
They thrive in these roles because they don't just recite theory. They speak with a raw, undeniable authority born from actual experience. When they stand on a stage and speak about overcoming adversity, they invigorate the audience.
Because the audience can intuitively sense that this person has genuinely survived the fire.
Precisely. Their underlying message to the crowd is essentially, I endured the destruction, I rebuilt myself, and I can show you how to do the same. They turn their personal invincibility into a contagious, motivating force for others.
Their methodology in these careers is fascinating. We discussed the hurricane analogy earlier regarding their shadow side, but their actual working style when healthy is entirely different.
Very different.
It is much more like water patiently eroding solid rock over years. They don't typically need to act like a bulldozer crashing through a wall with blunt force. Their invincible power stems from a persistent, unstoppable, and adaptable flow.
Right.
Just like a river slowly carving out a massive canyon, they eventually shape the hardest, most stubborn landscapes or organizational structures, not through sudden violence, but through relentless, adaptable persistence.
That is the ultimate strength of water.
Yeah.
It does not fight the obstacle. It simply interacts with it until the obstacle yields.
Yeah.
If water is blocked, it finds a way around, it seeps under, or it simply builds up pressure and stillness until the barrier breaks.
Yeah.
This is the exact professional and psychological methodology of the Purva Ashada individual. They outlast the resistance.
But this psychological stance of outlasting resistance and holding firm takes a physical toll. There is always a somatic link between our deepest psychological patterns and our physical bodies. According to the medical astrology outlined in the sources, where does this archetype hold its vulnerabilities?
The physical vulnerabilities for this specific energy are very clearly mapped out. They are located in the thighs, the hips, and the back, specifically the region from the neck down to the waist.
Those are the primary load-bearing structures of the human body.
Exactly. They are the anatomical areas that support us when we brace ourselves, stand our ground, and refuse to be moved.
It is a direct physical reflection of their psychological posture. The invincible believer braces themselves against the world, holding that rigid, unyielding stance in the hips and the back, which naturally leads to tension and vulnerability in those exact areas over time.
Furthermore, because of their profound connection to the goddess Apos and the cosmic waters, they are highly susceptible to what the sources categorize as watery issues.
Like what, specifically?
This includes kidney dysfunction, bladder issues, and generalized water retention. The body physically holds on to fluid in the exact same way the psyche stubbornly holds on to its deeply ingrained convictions, its past survival experiences, and its ego.
Wow. The physical stagnation of water mirrors the psychological stagnation of an ego that refuses to yield.
Exactly. The physical body becomes a metaphor for the mind. Holding on to water is holding on to the past.
So what does this all mean? We have this incredibly potent, charismatic survivor energy. It is adaptable but can become highly obstinate. It operates with the persistence of a river but risks the hubris of thinking it controls the weather. How does one actually integrate this intense energy? If you carry these traits, what is the ultimate lesson the texts suggest?
The existential core statement, the true karmic lesson for this psychology, is to recognize that genuine invincibility does not come from a stubborn ego.
Right.
It does not come from constantly bracing yourself against the world, holding your ground at all costs, or trying to prove that you are the hurricane. True invincibility is rooted in humility.
It comes from surrendering to a universal plan.
Yes. The ultimate realization for the Purva Ashada archetype is that you are most powerful when you stop trying to control the ocean and instead allow yourself to become the water flowing, adapting gracefully, and trusting the current rather than fighting it.
As the ambient sounds of the cafe continue to anchor us in this space, I want you to sit with that idea for a moment. The profound transition from fighting the current to simply becoming the water. Before we leave the table today, there is one final provocative image from the ancient texts to mull over on your own.
It's a powerful one.
The Rig Veda describes Agni, the fierce, unstoppable god of fire. But the text notes that even Agni, with all of his blazing, destructive, world-altering power, eventually has to physically submerge himself into the calm, cosmic waters of the goddess Apas just to rest.
He has to hide his flames in the water to recuperate his energy.
As you step back out into your day, ask yourself, where in your own life do your most fiery, unstoppable ambitions need to submerge themselves in calm, humble waters just to survive?